Hello, YouTube. Another fun-filled and exciting episode from Easy Prepping. This is the second video on my prepper library, and a section of it is on surviving off-grid after an SHTF. And one of the first books I'm going to cover has a very interesting quote in the first couple of pages. It's by Sarah J. Maas. "I can survive well enough on my own if given the proper reading material." I couldn't agree more. As I was saying, this first book, Prepper's Long-Term Survival Bible. Not a big book, you can see, but very condensed, concise, even big enough print for my old eyeballs to read, maybe even without glasses. But a lot of key information: pickling and fermenting, freezing, mushrooms, amphibians, fish, how to find and store food. A lot of information in a fairly small book. And next up, we have a series of 5 books from Backwoods Home Magazine. Is a quarterly magazine that I subscribe to. Emergency Preparedness and Survival Guide, volumes 1 through 5. Just an example that I flipped to in volume 1. Vitamins are important, especially if you have children, since children do not store body reserves of nutrients as adults do. A good quality multivitamin and vitamin C are most vital. Just one small example. Let's see, I bookmark here and something in, oh yeah, chapter 5 in volume 2, a quick tour of hyperinflation and the possible consequences for America. Well, pretty sure we're in that one. Volume 3, let's see, what did I bookmark here? Oh yeah, the New Madrid Fault. I know probably everybody's heard of the San Andreas Fault out there in California, but a fault runs in the middle of the U.S. is far less known is the New Madrid Fault. The last time it erupted big was in the winter of 1811 and 1812. The Mississippi River flowed backwards for, I think, 3 hours. It's a far, far more potentially damaging quake than even the San Andreas. Volume 4. It's got a lot of good information, but I didn't bookmark anything. And speaking of earthquakes, Volume 5 starts with, "It takes an earthquake to remind us that we walk on the crust of an unfinished planet." A quote by Charles Kuralt, an American journalist. Now with what we're now seeing in Turkey, that really strikes home. A couple of books that I picked up a few years ago on Bushcraft, which is surviving in the wild. Everything from tools for splitting wood, cooking in the wild, plants, starting a fire. Well, we have Bushcraft 101, a field guide to the art of wilderness survival, and Advanced Bushcraft, an expert field guide to the art of survival, wilderness survival. And then we have Survival Hacks, over 200 ways to use everyday items for wilderness survival. It's more like a tips and tricks kind of book. One thing I noticed in here was how to make a shelter from pallets, wood pallets. And one I flipped to here was Twisted Paracord Perimeter Alarm. Basically, you use paracord and a bunch of tin cans, which took me back to my study of World War II in the Pacific Theater, especially the island hopping warfare. The Marines and soldiers there designed a way to tell if the Japanese were trying to sneak up on them in the middle of the night by using cord in their empty ration cans. They would string them so that if anything disturbed that cord, the cans would rattle and wake them up and let them know somebody was trying to sneak in. The next book I'm going to recommend, well, if you only get one book on surviving after SHTF off the grid, get SAS, Survival Handbook for Any Climate in Any Situation by John Lofty Weissman, who was a member of the British SAS, Special Air Service, I think that stands for. That the closest thing we'd have to that would be our Navy SEALs. But this book covers everything. I mean, it is just extremely comprehensive. There's a very good section with color pictures on edible plants, poisonous plants, mushrooms, and I'd highly recommend this one. If you would indulge me, just a quick side trip about knowing the difference in plants, which this book is very good at. It's a true story. A man named John Krakauer wrote a book called Into the Wild, based on the story of Chris McCandless, I'll call him a kid. He graduated college, gave all his life savings, $20,000 or so, I think, to charity, and took off backpacking around the country, living off the land and just into the wild. He ended up in Alaska, where he went into the wild with nothing but his normal backpack, a .22 rifle, and a bag of rice. And he came across some old school buses that had been placed there out way in the woods, in the mountains, by hunters to use when they were out in that area hunting. And the spring thaw came quicker than he anticipated, and some of the small streams he had crossed were now raging rivers. He could not get out. But he had a field guide to plants, and he found a plant that he thought was edible, and it killed him. Quite a while later, when they found his body there, they, of course, investigated and found if he had turned the page, there was another plant that looked almost identical, that was poisonous. So the importance of being 100% certain when you identify plants for either consumption, medical, anything related like that. Next up from our survival library is another very thick, very large book. But once again, if you want one book to have a vast amount of knowledge on surviving, there is the Survival Wisdom and Know-How. 7,845 useful skills and step-by-step instructions. Everything you need to know to subsist in the wild. A very good addition to any prepper library. Just flipping through, there's how to get back in your kayak if you flip it over. How to read signs of bad weather forming. Very good book. As a lot of you can tell by my hat, and if you watched my first video, I'm a former Navy. I was 6 years back in the 70s, but the end of my career, I was working for the Army. I was a DOD civilian at Fort Knox, working for the United States Army. And although I greatly admire and respect our soldiers in uniform, the bureaucracy that surrounds, I know the Army and probably the Department of Defense, our Department of Defense in general, leads me a little bit wary of this book. I bought it on a recommendation from another prepper, but it's the U.S. Army Survival Manual. This is a May 2002 edition, and it is chock full of what appears to be a lot of very good information. And it's poisonous spiders, other insects, different poisonous snakes and where they live in the world. A lot of information in this. I was just, from my time working for the Army, I became skeptical of the bureaucracy. And this was created, I'm sure, by the bureaucracy. A slightly different vein would be books on, well, here we have the self-sufficient life and how to live it. These books are a little bit different than the surviving in the woods kind of books. These are more off-grid living, complete living off-grid. John Seymour, The Self-Sufficient Life and How to Live, the classic back to basic guide to going off-grid. And as you can see, it's a very large book. Peaches and apricots, how to clearing land, information on growing different vegetables, canning, which is a very good thing to learn. I might do some videos on canning. I've started doing that since I moved up here. Once again, color pictures makes it much easier to identify. And along that same vein, we have the Ultimate Self-Sufficiency Handbook, a complete guide to baking, crafts, gardening, preserving your harvest, raising animals, and more. And for all that information, it is in a fairly compact book. And it's canning times. It's very important when you do any home canning that you get the process right. You don't want to kill off all your family and friends, including yourself. How to make rag rugs. Just a lot of good information here if you think you might ever need to live off the grid. And lastly, we have The Forgotten Skills of Self-Sufficiency, used by the Mormon pioneers. Although I am not a Mormon, I like a book that gives you how to live, be self-sufficient. You see, this is a much smaller book, but still packed with a lot of information. What every family should know when considering hen keeping, which a lot of people have recommended to me I should do, but I'm not going to go down that route. And in closing, I'd like to ask, once again, if you have not already, click the subscribe button. If you liked this video and think I gave out some good information, please click the like button. And also, this is the first time I've asked if you would like to be notified when I post future videos. There's a little button down there, I believe it's a bell emblem, that will alert you when I post future videos. And in a parting quote, Cardinal Richard Cushing wrote, "Plan ahead. It wasn't raining when Noah built the ark." Thank you for watching.